Good morning. Today is May 18th, 2018, and it is time for another workshop here on the stream. My name is Jeff Fritz. Thank you so much for joining me. I see there's already about almost 70 folks out there in the chat room. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is a big day. This is a long day, and I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to learn a little bit of C Sharp today. I'm going to be going through a bunch of different hats today, changing them up throughout the day. I'm starting off with a geek hat. We did it on Reddit. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for the post over on Reddit. And I've got my build.net bot shirt, so I'm ready to go. But I want to introduce my first guest. My first pair programmer for today is Maria Naggaga. Maria, thank you. Happy Friday. Oh my gosh. Wow, and folks are going right into the deep end on the chat room already. Can somebody explain dependency injection today, please? I'm not sure we're going to get into dependency injection. You can't hear Maria just yet? Hang on, let me check the properties here. Let's make sure we're outputting everything. Give it another shot, Maria.
Happy Friday.
There we go. Now you can hear her. All right. So, yeah, folks asking about dependency injection. I'm not sure we're going to get to dependency injection just because that's more of a framework thing. We really are focusing a lot on language. Actually, way later in the day with Phil, we're going to talk about class design, and I think he did want to talk about dependency injection. We'll take a look then. Thank you so much for joining me, Maria. I really appreciate this. This is a huge event for us, and I really, I really want to thank you for that.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this.
They're asking if that's a dot matrix printer behind you there in your office.
No, I do not have a printer in my office. Like I
No, that's not a printer. Sorry.
not a printer.
So, um, let's kick things off here about C Sharp, about .NET. And let me actually get a browser open here before I go too far because I want to make sure that it's easy for folks to find and follow along with us.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to code and get started here. There we
Okay.
go. So the first place I wanted to show people to get started, right, is, of course, this website, which is dot.net, right? If you go in your browser, you key that into the address bar, it gets you right to the jump-off point for downloading and getting involved with .NET code here, right? And that means C Sharp. Wow, thank you to our followers already. And SQL Mr. Magoo, thank you for the bits. So for folks that don't have C Sharp tools installed, for folks that don't, there we go.
For part 1.
Very cool. Yes, and there's a link in the chat room already for DOTNET. Thank you. And this is a great place to go to download what we call the software development kit. You'll see folks refer to it as the SDK, right? It's the tools to install and get started. And there's other tools you can download as well here, including Visual Studio, Visual Studio Visual Studio Code, and Visual Studio for Mac. Thank you, Dev Chatter, for hosting the stream. Now, those are all really cool tools that you can run on your Windows, your Mac machine, your Linux machine. But Maria, you've got something else up your sleeve that's really cool to use if you want to work on your tablet with .NET.
Yep. Yeah, we have try.net. And for those of you who don't know what try.net, it's a service that enables you to write C Sharp code right in the browser. It's all container based, so don't worry, no one interferes with your environment. But it's a really great way for you to start exploring and testing the language hassle-free, which is really important for people, right?
Yeah, you know what? For folks that don't know if they want to install a big tool, a text editor like Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio 2017, Visual Studio for Mac, they can start running on their tablet, on their iPad.
Yeah.
That's tremendous for me. Just to answer coding for loose, I am using Windows today because we're going to be doing some experimental things later in the day where I need to be on Visual Studio 2017. There you go. Thank you, David Potesta, for posting that link. Yes. So let's go to try.net.
Net, yeah.
That feels kind of weird
It's,
typing it the first time.
it feels funny even when you see it, but it's become an internal joke at this point that we're not going to change it.
It works, right? It's easy to key that in and get
Yeah.
right into your code. So right off the bat, when you come here, you're presented with code.
Yep.
Um, and
Should,
it,
should we run it to see if people can guess what it is?
I think a few of our folks here in the chat room have seen it.
Okay.
Do you need VS Preview or just Community? You can use either today. We're not going to be going into any advanced IDE features. You can use Visual Studio Code today, and you can even, for all of our samples today, pretty much all of them, you're going to be able to use try.net throughout the day. So, yeah, let's just click run and see what happens here. And it's kind of over there on that side of me,
That's fine. Yeah.
right? You can see it's writing out the Fibonacci numbers, the Fibonacci sequence. So this seems pretty straightforward. We've got a little bit of code. Let's dive in and explain to folks a little bit of what's going on here. Now, public class program, okay, so we need to have classes in C#, right?
Yep.
Now, can you explain what main is, this public static void main? What is that?
That's a method.
Okay, that was quick.
I know.
So, on line 7, yes, that's a method signature, right? That's introducing and saying, here's a method that can be executed. And try.net is looking for main to start.
Yeah.
Static, would you like to explain what static is?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. So, static is this static keyword you see here on line 7 says that for any instance of this class, for all instances, there's only one copy of this method that's available, and it's always available. And try.net, when it goes to run some sample code that you key in the browser here, it's looking for the static void main, right? This is what we call the entry point for the application. And if you look below that, we're doing this little for loop here, and we'll learn about for loops later with Sarah. And it's just writing out whatever's in this I variable. That's pretty easy.
Yeah.
And it's actually referencing this other thing here, this other method called Fibonacci. So we have another method here called private static, and it has this I enumerable. We'll talk about enumerables later today, but it's a collection of integers called Fibonacci. Now, what's the difference between private and public, Maria?
Like you've just pulled out the younger person in me was like, oh, what is that?
Right, so those are two different scopes.
No, it's scopes within the two. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted today. Let me just turn off this IM. Sorry, guys.
Telling the boss, you know what, you got to take a back seat for a little bit.
I was like, no, sorry, we're having an issue with try.net, and I just want to make sure they're not pushing anything at the moment.
Oops. Sudoku asks a good leading question here. Do all C# apps need a main method? What is its purpose? That's a great intro question. So not all apps, not all projects need a main method, right? If you have some sort of an application that you're starting, you do need a main method, right? You'll see this in a console application you might write. You might see this inside of a forms application you might write. You'll see a main method that kicks off and initializes the various user interface components.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
In this case, try.net behaves a little bit like a console application. So that main method is kicking off the application, and the output on the console is what you see in that lower pane beneath the run.
Okay.
So the difference between public and private, do you want to?
So public can be accessed by anywhere in the code. So anywhere within the code, you can access whatever is in this public class. When it's private, it can only be, accessed by specific parts of the code. You have to actually state what parts of the code can access this.
Right. If it's private, it's actually only within the class.
Class, yes.
Right. And I can mark things as internal also, and they can be accessed by other classes inside the same program.
Yeah, so there are a couple of different things, and I don't know if it's right to bring them up this early in the day, but you'll have as like aspects of public, private, protected. What are the other ones? Internal,
Internal, yep. Uh, no,
protected internal.
right. You start mixing some of these
Yeah.
scopings. So, sealed. That's another good one. Well, we're gonna talk about inheritance in a little bit here with Sarah, right? We'll get to inheritance and some of those object-oriented concepts in just a little bit. I only want to talk about the scoping for right now. Protected does relate to inheritance, Andy. Yes. So there was another question here. Oh, what about two classes that have two static void mains? Well, in a typical program, you're going to specify which class it is that's your starting point, and it'll look for the static void main in that class. But here in try, I think it's only looking for static void main in a program class, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I,
that's kind of a convention that try.net is looking for right now. So, um, so I think that's the webcam or Skype dropping frames. I see that too. What are you saying? No, I think we're good. We're not dropping frames. I always liked friend in VB. So friend in VB is very similar to what we have as internal in C sharp. So you have this, right, this ability to share capabilities to other classes that you've written, but they can't get outside of that into other applications or other libraries or things like that.
well, that's such a good name for it.
The friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh, when I was learning VB, that was the thing to learn was, make sure you know how to do friend because you'd always get tripped up because people always knew public and private, but friend was the keyword. Oh, make sure you learn that for your interview so that you know what it's referring to. So, now this other thing that we have here, this int,
Mm-hmm.
that's a variable type.
Yeah.
And right, this is what we call a primitive type, and it's defining an integer, right? It's a number, a whole number here in C sharp, and it's available. It's from negative like 2.1 billion to positive 2.1 billion. You can use with an int. Now, there's a couple other primitive types out there that I want to highlight. Bool is also available, which is short for Boolean, right?
Yeah.
Double, decimal, and you get this great IntelliSense here in try.net. I really love that. It kind of helps you along. And
And it's
don't,
also a smarter IntelliSense. So it's learning as you're writing. So it gives you very specific ones
yeah.
in relation to the program that you're in.
Oh, yeah. Now, what I think is kind of interesting about the various type ahead here, right? The IntelliSense you get is there are folks out there that actually say that the IntelliSense rots your brain. No, it's things that I don't have to always remember all the time, and I can be focused on other things that my application needs to do, and I don't need to be overthinking about some of the syntax stuff in my code, right?
There's a really good question. Definitions versus primitives. What's the difference? Is that something that we're going to cover today?
Where do I'm looking at? What's the definition? Oh, definition of a primitive. Oh,
Yeah.
so these primitive types. These are types that come with .NET Framework that are available to you as a C sharp programmer, right? Because you're writing C sharp against the .NET Framework, and you're able then to use these very simple what we call value types, right? They're allocated in memory in on what's called the stack, and they're able to be reclaimed from memory very quickly and easily. So these value types, they're very basic, absolutely. Uh,
Yeah.
Native elements like an integer, Boolean, the various numeric types. Um, the tricky one that's out there is string,
String.
because string isn't a value type. String is actually what we call a reference type, right? Because it's actually, I almost forgot. We have character, right? Car.
Yep.
No,
You say char, I say char, so okay.
you say char, I say car. Potato, potato. I was always told that when I learned Oracle database, I was always told they call it car.
Okay.
Um, Whatever. Is it Laurel or Yanny?
Tiano.
It's YAML. There you go. Gosh, we spent a good hour last night on team chat talking about Laurel and Yanny. Um, so
I think. Mhm.
car is just it, right? It's just a point. It's a single character,
Yeah.
but a string is a collection of those characters, right? So what I find interesting about string, right, is you can always take a string and we define our variables by specifying the type name first and then the name of the variable. So let's call this my string, and then you pass into it. You can initialize it here with a value. So, right, I could say something like "Hello World." Every line ends with a semicolon. That's how C# knows where the lines
Yeah.
end, right, where our statements end. Now, have you seen this? That I can do my string dot, and then there's actually like two character array, and I could cast it back into a collection of characters. But what was that? What are these stars that I'm seeing in the window here with my IntelliSense?
So those are the most likely things that you're going to use.
So I
That was okay. Go ahead.
please finish.
So those are the smarter choices. So we're using machine learning, and I probably shouldn't get that into it for a beginner's tutorial, but we're using machine learning to learn about what the most likely next thing will be for you, and that's why we have a star.
Right. So I heard the folks at Build last week. They announced this feature called IntelliCode that does it right. This is what's doing that machine learning. I love seeing this because as folks use the various features in the framework, we can surface and jump right into those things that people most frequently want to do.
What exactly? A really good starting point, and I don't know where I can share links here, and because I'm with you on Skype, but I will share it with you. As people who are doing this for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
one of the so if you can grab that link, and I will walk you through some examples.
I will copy it. Let's run over here. Ah, the C# quick starts. This is a great place to get
It's a
started.
great place, and it's built with try.net in the back end. But if you go to the Hello World one, what I like about this is the simplicity. If you are a new developer or a person who is brand new to C#, this is a great place to get started without being bogged down. I don't know if that's an American term, but it was very common when I was in school
Go
in
ahead.
Canada. It's a great way to just focus on what the code is doing. So if you go over to the Hello World one,
Yep. All right. Hello. Yeah. Hello, C#.
yeah,
So I'm clicking begin, and it shows me a .NET editor on the right side.
and it shows you these step by steps, and you can click copy
And,
and paste it over here.
and I'll
You
just
can just Control V.
yep. And then there's a run button, and you
You
get the
run it.
same try.net output experience down here.
Great. Yeah, but let's look at what's at the bottom, right? So you've written your first line of code. The first thing that you're ever going to do is write your first line of code. Is going to be Hello World. So imagine knowing like just the syntax. You know what a console is. It tells you the console is a type, right?
Oh yeah.
Like it breaks down what every single line of code does. So as you're learning like the flow, this is a really good tool to use because you learn by seeing and doing.
Absolutely, right? And that hands-on aspect of all of this is very important. That's why I wanted to make sure that folks right up front here know that how to get to try.net, how to get a copy of Visual Studio if they want to run that.
Yeah.
And then, right, you can always come back and watch this video later if you'd like. Folks are asking, when will IntelliCode be available? There's a 15.8 preview that you can download if you go to visualstudio.com. And it's an extension you can install. Real easy to get from inside of Visual Studio if you want to try that feature you saw us show off here, actually in try.net first. It's only available in full Visual Studio. It's not available in Visual Studio Code. So,
Let's run that and let's get the length of my string.
Oh,
Let's
sure.
let's let's edit this code.
This one right here in try.net. So if I say mystring.length, well, let's actually move this. Now, am I right that the Alt key works here?
See?
Right? If I do Alt up, oh yeah. This is one of my favorite features here.
Oh yeah, you keep on like, and every single time I see you do it, I'm just like, oh wow.
Right, so it's a feature that's in all of the Visual Studio editors. If you highlight code and you hold down the Alt key, and you can move it up and down with the arrow keys. So I'm going to just remove that for
Yep.
loop here, and let's just write out that string length.
Yep.
So then, look, I've got the star there for right line.
Mm-hmm.
So I just hit tab to finish that line, and then I'll just mystring.length.
Okay.
And run that. Running. And it says it's 11 characters long. So very simple, very easy to get started, but this length is what's called a property, right? We saw Fibonacci is a method. Length is a property on the string object. So it gives us different ways to inspect what's going on with that object. Is there a shortcut for the run button?
Not yet.
There you go. There's your answer.
Not yet, but it's coming. It is coming because we want to be more, accessible.
Kira Laura asks, what kind of project file should I choose in Visual Studio? Kira, for the most part for today, go ahead and start a console application, and you'll be able to run there. Control K, Control C works for commenting out, they're saying?
Yeah, that will work.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's a standard hotkey. Yep, just like Visual Studio 2017.
Mm-hmm. Because it's built on Monaco, which is used in Visual Studio Code. So anything that you can do there, you can do here.
Now, one thing that we've talked about here, Mr. Magoo is suggesting Visual Studio Live Share in Try would be really cool. I kind of agree. That would be really neat, but that's like a couple steps down here. We've got to, right? We want to get the editor running really neat here in the browser first, I think.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that's just a little bit of getting started in some of the simple things here for the right primitives, console, writing stuff out to just to the command line. A little bit about methods, what a property is. Oh, let's declare a property.
Yep.
Do we have, is that over here in the tutorial? Would it be easier to show over here?
I think it would be easier if you go back to the contents page.
Sure. Do more with strings, declare and use variables.
Yeah.
Let's go to this one. So this is similar type of interaction with console write line. Let me see here. Let's go down and click that next button. Right, so you can concatenate together various things here. This is showing string interpolation is what this is. There's all kinds of little games you can play with that. But you can also concatenate things together here. Uh-oh. I'm not getting my spacebar working over on this side.
Let's see.
Let's go back. Close that. What other... Do we have another quick start where I can see...
List and collection, so that might be too early in the day. I think string interpolation is right there.
Okay, let's look at that one. Yep, begin. So string interpolation is a feature, right, that came along just recently with C#.
Yeah, about what, 2 years ago, I want to say, when I just joined the team.
Yeah, roughly. And right, we declare our variables like this, and this is a var. What's the var keyword here?
Variable?
Right, this lets us dynamically say, hey, C#, you go figure out what type this is. You know because of what's being initialized. So I'm just going to key in Maria here. Now, string interpolation, right? This is kind of interesting here. The format of this, right? Hello, and then curly braces name. What's it doing with those curly braces?
Because I think one thing that just to simplify what string interpolation is for people,
Yeah,
it's a way to insert values into a single string. So basically what we are doing is that we're taking this variable that has variable called name that is equal to Maria, and we want to place it anywhere in this string.
right. So the
This,
dollar, yeah, the dollar is saying, hey, look for someplace that we're going to be inserting some code in the middle of this string.
yes. So the dollar is almost like what's it? It's oh, it's a really good. You know how in Spanish they have the question mark can come before the beginning of the sentence,
Yes,
right? So it's almost like it's a presensor saying that, by the way, we are inserting something in here.
right. And the curly braces indicate, okay, now we're changing from text to code.
Exactly.
So if I just run it like that, you see it formats and puts Maria in there.
But do you want to show them what it used to look like so we can
Oh,
how?
what it used to look like. Yeah. For I hit backspace and I've left the page. We used to have to do. It's not letting me delete. Oh no! I'm clicking backspace and it's navigating.
Oh man! Oh man! What is it doing? What is it doing?
All right, hang on. I'll paste that back in. Change this back to Maria. We used to have to go something like this.
Yep.
And we'd concatenate things together, right? We would merge these strings together
And
with
I
plus
like the
signs.
use of that. Like merge this together. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you were very clearly, because you ended a quote, you were outside the string and saying, okay, add this thing in there. Now, okay, we know name is a string, and it does work. That's not bad. But isn't this a pain in the neck to have to flip flop back and forth with these pluses?
Just not sophisticated.
It's not. And Sushinator is actually, spoiler alert, jumping forward to the next bit that I was going to suggest. We used to have to use string.format,
Oh yes.
right? And this was, right? My cursor has, after I click run, my cursor ends up
Where?
not allowing me to delete. I end up
Okay.
losing focus.
That's a good thing to note that we're having with the editor.
Yeah. So let's replace that, and we write the string.format command, right? So if I type string dot, and then there it is, it's right up top, format, right? And then this is a method. You need to tell it what's the format you want, and then what are you putting into it. Now, what was weird about this, you had to give it positions, right? And then you had to tell it, well, here's what to put in that position. So and everything starts counting with 0. So in the 0th position, I'm going to paste in that. And then if I click run, what did I forgot an extra parenthesis at the end here. And it's not letting me write in the window again. Oh no, I did a control A and it copied that. All right, hang on. I'm going to copy that. Let me refresh. Yes, try the code in my browser. Right. Thank you to all the folks that are following us today. That's great. Holy crow. That's not what I wanted to copy. Hang on, let's delete that. Copy this in. Paste that. Paste. There we go. All right. So let's try this one more time. So we'll replace this with Maria, and we had changed this to string.format, and then hello 0, but it's not really a 0, it's actually the name, and I need an extra parenthesis at the end, and now it'll run, and I get the same thing, but that string interpolation is so much nicer. Uh-oh, I think you went on mute.
Sorry, I've been talking the entire time.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
So what's interesting to me here is we're effectively with string interpolation doing the exact same thing we had with string.format. It's just we don't have these numbers that we're embedding in the middle of our strings that we're formatting here. And I'm seeing some folks asking about file names when they're working in Visual Studio. So we've shown a little bit here about how to get started with these things in try.net and how to start with C#. What do you say we roll over to Visual Studio and show how to do some of the getting started over there?
Okay. Are most people on Windows here? Yes. Thumbs up, thumbs down if you're on Windows. So that way we can see.
Yeah, let us know what you're using. So I'm using the Visual Studio 2017 preview on a Mac. All right. You'll be able to do the same things in Visual Studio Code. This is 15.8 preview 1.1. All right. And I was saying most of what we're doing here today you can do as a console application. So if you do File New Project, you can choose .NET Core, you can choose Windows Desktop. Either one of those are fine. Both of those have the same access to the features that we're going to be using for the most part today in C#. But I'm going to create a console application right here. And, you know, put it wherever makes you happy here on disk. So I'm going to choose my dev folder, console app 3. That works fine. And I'm going to choose the latest version of the .NET framework. Now, .NET Framework, .NET Core, two different versions of the .NET Framework that C# runs on top of. One runs, .NET Framework runs only on Windows, and it ships with Windows and always ships with Windows. .NET Core ships on NuGet, and we get new versions available and delivered to us as packages. But we also, don't we ship another .NET Framework, Maria, but for mobile devices?
Xamarin.
Right. So if you want to build... Go ahead, please.
Go ahead. Yeah, if you want to build an application that can run on all three platforms, Xamarin is the one for you.
And your phone.
On your phone, like
And your phone.
Xamarin is running here. I don't know. Do you know popular apps that were built with Xamarin?
Some popular apps built with Xamarin. Well, the one that I use all the time, Untapped, is written with Xamarin.
Oh, okay. What's that?
So Untapped, it's social network for tracking your beers that you're drinking with your friends.
Oh, yes. I think I've seen you and Damien tweet a couple of those. Okay.
A couple times, yep. Let's see. Somebody was just asking here. You can type code and see results immediately without creating a class. Yes, you can do that in the try.net window. I do not create Angular courses on Udemy. No. So did I do a console app.net core or console app.net framework? So this time I created .NET framework. You can create either. It's up to you. Thank you so much to all the folks that are following us today. This is great. You know, I really appreciate you joining us. We're up to about 130 folks in the chat room.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, there's a view count right above your head there on the video.
Let's see.
And Nemi's right. You can use the interactive window in Visual Studio to get the same experience as what you're getting in try.net. Where is it? It is, I think it's under other windows, C# interactive. There's also an F# interactive down there too. Right, so I can do very much the same types of interactions.
So you can do this. You show them console.writeLine. What about readline?
Oh, sure. So console.writeLine, just to show that works. Let's type that out. And it's taking really long to run. There it goes. Now, you're right. Console.readline. Let's take a look at that for a second. Console.readline will just wait until it sees a carriage return, until it sees you hit enter.
Yep.
Right? And I've brought the circle of patience here. And it doesn't want to respond.
I think it's
Did I break it?
It's Friday. I think it's just like
it's Friday. Take a powder. No reason to restarting. There we go.
So console.readline.
Yeah, and it's just kind of hanging there.
Well, just for people to know on the line is that we don't support console.readline in try.net. So if you're trying it over there, it will not work.
So folks are saying, just try typing hello and see what happens. Right, and it just returns that exact same thing, right? If I do 1 plus 2, it'll evaluate and calculate that. So those simple programming interactions you can do here.
Yep.
You can get more complex, but the same things that we were doing over in try.net, right? Public static void main, and then a method down here, static void main, right, with a collection of arguments that are being passed in, right? This is a console application, program class. Now, where do these arguments come from that it's receiving here? Right? Those, right, aren't those the things that when you launch this application from the command line, you pass in arguments next to it, those command line switches? Oh, May Manson, thank you for referencing that. Can we explain namespaces and public static mains? Sure. Do you want to cover namespaces quickly?
Nope.
All right, I'll take it. So namespaces, like you see here, console app, they're just a way for us to organize our code. They're a way for us to put our application classes and objects in different locations so that we can reuse the various class names, the various object names that we're going to be using throughout our application. This way, when other folks go to use components of our application, when they reference those objects, they're able to have things that are named the same thing but living in their projects. But because they're under a different namespace, right? This one is console app 3. I can have, whatever namespace I want out here. Namespace console app 3 dot, and then I can start chaining these together with dots. So I can say, dot models, let's say, right? Or let's say user interface, right? And maybe I have some user interface stuff in here. May Manson, you're right. So I can reference that other object, right? So let's create public class foo. And I can reference foo from up here inside of this other namespace, right? This is stuff, and it's a new. We create a new instance of a class with the new keyword. And if I say new foo, IntelliSense shows me it doesn't know what a foo is. But Visual Studio is kind of helping me along here with this red underline and saying, oh, are you missing a reference? If I use control dot there, which triggers this little light bulb on the side here, it'll allow me to generate either a using statement or it'll allow me to put the full name of that object, user interface dot foo. And now I put 2 parentheses there because I'm creating it. I need to create it as a method, right? Create as an action, so we need to put parentheses after the name of the object we're creating. And I've created a foo object, this object, and I'm putting it in a stuff keyword. Now, somebody was saying that Xamarin's not too great for writing mobile applications because of screen sizes. Mainly use React Native, Android Studio for iPhones. I mainly use React Native, and that's okay. That's your choice. There's all kinds of choices, but some products are better for other things. It's up to you. We know a lot of folks that have success with Xamarin. Some folks, it doesn't work for them. It's up to you. I feel the need to mention what Jeff is doing right now, putting multiple classes and even namespaces in the same file is for demonstration. Great point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, actually, I put an because one of the things of namespaces, classes, objects, methods, and properties, these are all things that when anyone is learning how to program for the first time are pretty hard to wrap your head around. So in the chat window, I've done something that if anyone's done an interview before, their very first interview, this is how I like to break it down for them. And it would be great if you shared it with the team. It's if you think about building a car, it's always the most generic example used, or if you think about building a car, building a school or anything. the way to think about a namespace, it's a category or brand of the car. But note that it doesn't tell you anything about, um, how the car is built. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yep.
So, like, it tells you, like,
It's
um,
it's the
you
brand.
have a you have a brand, like
It's a
it's Honda,
Ford.
but yeah, it's a Ford, right? But it's not telling me about the specifics of the car. What a class does is that a class provides the specifics, a blueprint to how we build a specific car.
So let's start following that. Let me just follow your example down here. So namespace, and let's call it Ford, right?
Ford. Hmm.
And all of these things are enclosed in curly brackets here, so that we can keep them grouped together.
Yeah.
All right.
And then we'll have like a public class. What's a type of a Ford car, right? Let's say.
And a Fusion.
Let's go with that.
All right. So I've got a Ford Fusion here.
Yeah. And then when you think about the object, right, it's the actual car, the instances created from the car blueprint. So, for example,
There's lots of Ford Fusions out there. Lots of folks buy them at various dealerships and whatnot, right?
yeah,
So I could have up in here, right? I could have my car. No. This is a Ford
yeah,
Fusion, and it's called my car,
right, my car. Yeah.
right? Public Ford Fusion, Maria's car. Maria would never drive a Ford Fusion, but you get it.
Yeah, I'd probably drive a Tesla, but let's just keep it there.
There you go.
I live in New York. I use the subway. Right. So we've declared, we have our classes, we have our objects, right? So when we think about the method, something that the user can make the car do. So what can you make it Ford, what can your Ford Fusion do, right?
Right.
It can start the engine without a key or something. Like, I could be lying. I have no idea.
Sure.
But
So let's try start engine.
Yep, start engine.
Right. So that's a method.
Start an engine. Change gears. Is that the right term? I haven't driven a car since 2007.
Shift gears.
Yes.
Right.
Right. Shift gears. Roll down windows.
Oh.
Brake. Open door.
Roll down windows. Right. These are all methods.
These are all methods.
Now, just for simplicity, right now I have them returning void. Right. Void is a keyword that means nothing. It doesn't actually return a value here.
It allows you to do what you want. Like, it's empty right now.
Right. Now, I could have start engine return a Boolean that indicates whether it successfully started. Right?
Yes.
If my battery is dead, well, maybe I return false to indicate, engine didn't start.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll return true if it's successful in starting the engine. What about static void and public class? What do they mean? So static void, what you see here, what that means is this is a static method. It's always available. You don't need to actually create an instance of this class to get access to this method. Void means it's not going to return a value out of this. There's no value being returned from this method. And public class means that this class is accessible to this entire application, and if another application or project references this, it can see it also. So that's what that means.
And that brings us back to what we talked about earlier, public versus private classes.
Yes, right. Private classes can't be seen outside of this.
Yeah, so if you look at a lot of internal programs that we're writing at Microsoft, like if you look at the back end of try.net, you'll see a whole lot of private in there.
Sure. Those are, yep, you can have private classes. So we have a public class Fusion here. If I add another project to this solution, right, so we can have, this is a solution that has projects in it. Inside of this, I can add what's called a class library that contains other things that we want to reference, right? So if we make this, you were saying Tesla, right? So if we have Tesla, and our class here is a model, what is it, Model S?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And we might also have, right, we might also have a private class, and we'll call that the model M for Maria, right? And why am I getting elements in cannot be explicitly declared as. Da, 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 da. Why is it saying?
You need to, is it asking you to make it protected instead?
No, I should be able to make it private. It's a private class. I should be able to do that.
Let's see. Let's give it a moment to think. Okay.
Cannot be explicitly declared. Yeah, that's fine. So there we go. So now I have this is a because I didn't give it a modifier. This is a private.
Okay.
So class is internal by default. There you go. Right. So it's you can actually declare classes inside of other classes. So I can say
No, that makes
private class, and maybe there's a private class that is only available in here, and it's the steering wheel, right? And I can have that only available inside of the Model S class. But this Model M is not accessible by other things that might reference it. And we can reference this class library.
inside of the console application.
Yeah. Right, if I choose add reference, right, I can tell it reference that class library. So now console app references class library. And inside of here, I can say var Maria's real car equals new, right? Tesla, spelled
Yeah,
Tesla, right? And notice it has the little curly braces there to show me this is a namespace. Dot, and then I'm stepping down into it. So there's my Model S.
exactly. You're able to read into it. So, just to get back to the person who asked the question, like, are you understanding the difference between namespaces, classes, objects, methods? I
I'm
can't.
I'm sorry. I was just looking at a question in the chat room. Can you repeat that?
So there was. I want to make sure the person who did ask about, namespaces, what a namespace is beginning to understand, because I know that that is a bit of a, like, for a first time programmer, that can be.
Yeah. Right. So we've seen right very quickly here methods, how we can reference other objects, and because I'm creating a new instance of Maria's Model S,
Yeah.
I need to put parentheses after that. Now, we were also saying there's properties,
Yep.
right? So properties are right. Those are those properties that you expect to see on on a car in this case. So
Like,
like color, right?
exactly. Mileage.
Oh my gosh, yes. Right. Now, properties. There's a couple different ways to declare properties. Let's reference just the what we call an automatic property here with get and set. Right. This basically says you can get values for color, and you can also set values for color. And that's a string, so I can say, right, um, up here in this class, I can specify that, we're going to define what Maria's car's properties are. Using let's create a constructor, right? So this is a method that has the same name as the class, and it's called a constructor. And I can say Maria's car equals, well, it's a new Ford Fusion in this case. And I can also say Maria's car.color. What color is your car, Maria?
In my mind, it's red.
Of course it's red. And I've now just set a property here
Exactly.
that says
Maria's car is red.
Maria has a red Ford Fusion, where we really know it's actually a Tesla Model S, right? So, anyways, but you get the point here. I can set these properties on this object, and then I'm able to read those back out later by referencing the property like this, right? I could say, right, car color equals that, and now I'm reading out that property value into this variable here.
And I do have, I think of it as a dictionary.
Oh, okay.
And I will share this with people where you can just understand just some of the basics. And it's just a Stack Overflow question that I believe was answered really, really well,
Yep.
because it just takes away any language syntax or anything like that and just sticks with the basics.
Sure. Now, and folks are pointing out, if you do want to run this, yes, you press F5 inside of Visual Studio, and it'll start it'll start up the application. So if I were to say console.writeLine here, I can write out properties about Maria's car. So let's change that from a new Tesla. Let's go grab this other one over here and just write this out so we can show you how to put together just a little bit. Maria's real car, color equals red, and I can say here, let's use that string interpolation a little bit. Maria's car is the color, and then I can say Maria's real car dot color, and it'll output the property here. Now, let's do that console read line. And as they're showing here in the chat room, I'll start, and it'll start the console app because that's the one in bold. That's the one it knows to start first. And it'll start the main method here. And we should see, right, Maria's car is the color red, right? That's really small. Let's bump that up. Right, so there it is.
Yeah, there we go.
So, oh yeah, Janescu, you're getting into a little bit of abstract classes. We're going to get into that in the next hour with Sarah. So we've seen a little bit about properties. We've seen a little bit about methods. There's also something called fields.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's actually a little bit of what I'm doing here. I'm declaring variables directly inside of a class. So, Sarah who, Brendan? Oh, that's going to be Saduki in a little bit. Sarah Dukevich is going to join us.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. We've got a very busy day. Sarah Ford a little bit later today will be talking. We're lining up the Sarahs. So,
Sarah, one Sarah after the other.
Nah. We could do that someday, but I don't have that lined up quite like that today. So these two variables, right, public, and they're hanging directly off of a class and not inside of a method. These are called, right, these are called fields, and you're directly accessing them. I can set up my properties to allow me to interact with those. Excuse me. So if I said public for.fusion, right, and if I call this Maria's car property, right, now I can set up this as a property. It doesn't have a set of parentheses next to it to indicate it's a method. I can allow you now to interact with the Maria's car, right? I can say there's a get here on this property and return Maria's car. And we can also do a set, and we can allow you to say Maria's car equals, and then it's this implicit keyword here called value, and that's whatever, right, when we said red here and we were setting the value for the color, that's what we're doing here. This value is what we're receiving, and we're going to pass it into the Maria's car field hanging behind the scenes. All right.
All right. Before I leave, I think it's important, like some references that I would strongly suggest for people, if you can pull them up. Some people have already put them in, but like docs.microsoft.com.
Oh, yeah.
They have the C# programming guide.
Docs, Microsoft.com. It's a great place to jump off if you want to go into other topics that we're discussing here throughout the day.
And everything that is .NET, C# related will be under .NET. So when people go to this landing page, you might get a little bit confused. And I think later in the day, you're going to explain what .NET is.
Oh, yeah. And then you gave me this other Stack Overflow link.
Yes, I really like that link. It was actually shared with me through the Code Newbie chat channel.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a really good breakdown of like, this is a namespace, this is a class, project, inheritance, right? Overriding, polymorphism, and in very simple terms, right? Very simple terms. So like when you're thinking about writing your code, think about it as a sentence and how does this story come together?
Okay.
Another book that I would recommend.
The C Sharp 3 Player's Guide. Okay.
Player's
And,
Guide, of course. John Skeet's In Depth to C Sharp is another good one.
oh, yeah.
It's a big read, but it's a good one.
Oh, yeah. Let's go to. So I have a page here for the workshop all day today. You're going to be able to get access to it. It is right here, this README. I've got a couple pull requests from some of our folks, some of our speakers throughout the day here, but we're going to put links to all these things right down here in this Where Can I Learn More? All the various links that folks reference. Thank you, Saduki, for linking that in the chat room. And we'll make it easy for folks to find and get a little bit more information here.
All right, so I will make that pull request for everyone.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Everything try.net is great for like quick console applications. We do have things coming up with ASP.NET Core, which is going to be exciting. Yeah, I have a prototype running locally on my machine.
Okay.
That I can't share at the moment, but I will.
Cool. Very cool. And something that I want to make sure, yes, there are naming standards that people use. Don't use emoji for your variables. var equals new Fritz, but that's a bad idea. The readability there is terrible.
Yep.
And the last thing that I wanted to get into right before we head over to the next one, those methods that we were creating, you can take input parameters so you can pass in arguments to your various methods. And we'll see more about that throughout the day. All right. So I've got some pull requests here that I'm gonna merge in, add some links from Steve. Sarah's got some cool things here. Oh wow. Link to my gist for the try.net followers. All right. No Unicode smiley face variable names, John Galloway.
Is John just hanging around on the stream?
Oh man. So John and I are planning to rerun our ASP.NET workshop from Build here on Twitch in the next week or two. He's got some traveling to do, but we're going to get to that a little bit later on. But I really appreciate you joining us, John. So I think that's all the time we have, Maria.
Yeah.
That went quick.
It did go quick. I just blinked my eyes and I was like, oh, it's 10:58.
I know.
Or like 7:58 John's time. So thank you, John.
Yeah, right. John's an early riser. He's probably on the treadmill if I know him. And because, right, he's doing the P90. P90X, is that what it's called that he's doing?
Yes.
Let me tell you, I saw him last week, and yeah, the guy's losing weight. So, are there any breaks between sessions? Never. Start up Twitch on your phone. Take it with you. All day. Let me tell you, I've got food lined up here. I've got water bottles. It's going to be crazy busy.
When you say food, people might think that you're offering to get them a meal.
No. I'm not. You cannot order meals here through the stream. That's not happening. Alrighty.
All right.
Well, thanks so much, Maria. I'm going to disconnect from you, and we'll get ready for our next speaker.
All right.
I'll catch you later. See ya. All right. And there goes Maria. I'm going to come.